The courtroom buzzed with low whispers as Marcus Ree, 37, stood alone at the defense table, suit neat but a touch worn. Across the aisle, Blake Landon, First Harbor Bank's prizefighter, leaned back like he owned the room, while Judge Edwin Crowley chuckled from the bench. "Representing yourself, Mr. Ree?" he teased, tapping the gavel. "This should be entertaining." Marcus didn't blink. He held the judge's gaze and said, steady as steel, "I'm not here to entertain, Your Honor. I'm here to win. Before we jump in, tell us where you're watching from. And if you stand for justice, like and subscribe for more stories like this." 6 months earlier, Marcus stood on his late mother's cracked porch, sunlight slicing across weathered steps. The home, held for 3 generations, wasn't just property, it was memory. In his hand, an eviction notice screamed in red, "Final notice! Vacate in 14 days." His throat tightened. His mother died believing it was paid off, free and clear. How could the bank claim otherwise? Heart-pounding, Marcus tore through the file cabinet. Mortgage statements, tax receipts, the original deed, everything neat and present. Then he froze. A second mortgage agreement he'd never seen, bearing what looked like his mother's signature. But the handwriting trembled strangely. The slant was off. It felt wrong. He dialed the bank and sat on hold nearly 30 minutes, knee bouncing, until a clipped voice answered from First Harbor's foreclosure department. He steadied himself, ready to challenge whatever script they threw at him. "I'm calling about an eviction on Elise Ree's property," Marcus said, fingers whitening on the phone. "There's been a mistake. Her mortgage was paid, deed in hand." The woman sighed. "Sir, the account is in default due to non-payment on a second mortgage taken 2 years ago. Foreclosure is final." Marcus scowled. "Impossible. She never took a second loan. I'm looking at a signature that isn't hers." "Maybe you didn't know her finances," she shot back. "Request documents through legal. It won't stop the eviction." He stared at the mantle photo. His mother laughing the day she burned the original mortgage, and grabbed his keys. At the branch, Damon Klein, the manager, barely scanned the file before shoving it back with a smirk. "People like you should remember how the system works," and he said, "In default, you lose the house." Marcus leaned in. "That second signature isn't hers. Look at it." Klein's eyes flicked, unmoved. "Signatures change. Want to fight? Hire counsel and act fast." The clock was already ticking. Lawyers weren't an option. Corporate downsizing had ended his social work job. Now he cleaned floors at the community center to keep lights on. No retainer money. That night, he spread papers across the kitchen table, eyes burning from fine print. A text from his girlfriend, Naya, 35, lit his phone. "How bad?" He typed back, "Bad, but I'm not quitting." Next morning, legal aid said they were at capacity. Private firms declined. Conflicts, workloads, or blunt honesty. "We don't take cases we can't win." By noon, a white notice was taped to his door. "Sheriff's eviction in 10 days. Panic buzzed under his skin. That evening he hit a town hall, waiting to corner Councilman Brent Hawley. Smiles for cameras, not much else. When he finally spoke, Hawley patted his shoulder like a wayward teen. "I sympathize," he said. "The bank followed procedure. Best find alternative housing." "This isn't just a house," Marcus snapped. Hawley's smile hardened. "History doesn't pay the bills, son." The word landed like a slap. He went home gutted, not broken. The eviction wasn't just about money. It reeked of power and erasure. On his mother's bed, he stared at the ceiling until resolve crystallized. If they expected him to leave quietly, they'd misjudged him. Past midnight, the notice glared like a death sentence. He cross-checked every line. The second mortgage looked wrong. Uneven ink, like a copy. He searched mortgage fraud cases. Horror stories flooded the screen. Forged signatures, predatory loans, families tossed out over paper tricks. One case jumped out. A homeowner beat foreclosure after proving an invalid transfer. The key move? A formal demand for every document tied to the loan. Marcus scribbled notes, mind racing. He needed counsel, but he had grit, a library card, and time. Next morning, he walked into the courthouse with a folder and told the clerk, "I need to file a motion for a stay of eviction." She eyed the forms. "Representing yourself?" He nodded. "You'd be better off finding an attorney." "I'll it, anyway," he said, jaw set. She stamped the forms. "Judge will review. Don't get your hopes up." By midday, he was home, exhausted, flipping pages when Naya called. "Any luck?" "Filed the stay," he said. "Long shot, but something." She exhaled. "What if you lose? What if they toss everything while you're working?" He stared at the mantle photo. "I can't think about that. This isn't just a roof. It's standing up to people who think we don't have power or rights." 2 days later, the hit landed. Motion denied. In the hallway, the rejection letter trembled in his hand. He'd followed every rule and still ran into a wall. Fueled by frustration, he stormed back to the originating branch. Klein sipped coffee behind a polished desk, unbothered. "Show me the original second mortgage file," Marcus said, voice low. "Prove it." Klein leaned back, lazy. "File a discovery request. Otherwise, we're done." Marcus swallowed the burn, turned on his heel, and walked into heat. That night, mopping the community center's empty halls, he replayed every slight. Mrs. Hollins, an elder volunteer who'd marched back in the day, watched him. "Baby, you look like the world's on your shoulders," she said. He managed a tired smile. "Feels that way." She nodded. "When they push you to the edge, you can fall or fight. If you fight, learn their rules better than they do." Lightning down his spine. The law. He didn't need a lawyer if he became the expert. He borrowed treatises, printed foreclosure guidelines, devoured statutes, highlighter squeaking across margins. Sleep fell off the calendar. Days blurred. Then he found it. A line in the code. Every mortgage transfer must include a valid endorsement from the prior lender. If the endorsement's missing, standing collapses. He pulled the bank's filings and felt his pulse spike. The last transfer lacked the endorsement. Legally, First Harbor had no right to foreclose. He drafted a discovery motion, hands steady for once. Or, it was a gamble. The judge could toss it instantly. Instead, 2 days later, the court granted his discovery motion. Relief loosened the vice on his chest. Briefly, the bank hit back. The next morning, his checking account was frozen for fraud review. Autopays bounced. By evening, the lights died. When he called, a rep said technical issue, but Klein's smug tone said otherwise. Later, Naya arrived, face tight. "Your car's gone," she whispered. Tow truck came. Looked official? His stomach dropped hard. This wasn't about a house anymore. They meant to grind him until quitting felt like mercy. He stood in the dark, fists clenched, heartbeat loud in his ears. They'd misread him. He wasn't just fighting for his mother's legacy. He was fighting for everyone steamrolled by a system engineered to keep them small. Was he risking too much, chasing a win no one believed in? Or was this the moment that would define him? Comment 1 if you'd keep fighting, and share if you stand. Marcus sat in the dim kitchen, the fridge now silent, the room a hollow shell. The discovery order wasn't just relief, it was a weapon. He had to wield it right. At the courthouse next morning, he filed a detailed request, original note, mortgage, all transfers, the notarized second mortgage papers. The clerk, Tasha, a younger black woman, offered a knowing half smile. "Fighting a bank? Every day," he muttered. "Most folks give up," she said, stamping the papers. "Good luck." Luck felt irrelevant. 3 days later, the bank answered, not with documents, but with a motion to quash, calling his request overbroad and burdensome. He read it twice, fury simmering. They weren't even pretending to play fair. He drafted a counter motion, citing midnight case law, and hand-delivered it. That afternoon, Judge Crowley's chambers called. In-person hearing. Translation: the bank had a stage to crush him publicly. Marcus ironed his one good shirt, printed exhibits, and rehearsed until the printer hummed hot. 2 days later, he faced the bench. Landon was all theater, slick hair, razor suit, the smirk of a man who bills by the sneeze. "Your Honor," he purred, "this is a fishing expedition by a pros defendant delaying the inevitable." Crowley lounged, bored. "Mr. Rhee, why make the bank jump through hoops?" Marcus held up two versions of the note, the original and the second. "Because the signatures don't match. My mother's signing is consistent everywhere else, but this variation is glaring." Crowley waved a hand. "Signatures change." Marcus didn't flinch. Not in 3 months, and not when the second was supposedly signed the day after my mother was hospitalized for a stroke. The judge's eyebrows climbed. "You're alleging falsified documents." "We won't know without discovery," Marcus said evenly. "If there's nothing to hide, produce the originals." Landon bristled. Procedure was followed. Crowley rubbed his temple, then sighed. "Discovery stands. The bank has 7 days to produce." Outside, his phone lit up. "Naya, did you win?" "Not a win," he texted, staring at the courthouse doors. "But they've got to hand over records." "And if they don't?" she asked. "Then we'll know the rot runs deeper," he wrote. He didn't get 7 days. 3 days later, he returned from a night shift to find movers hauling his mother's couch through the doorway. "What are you doing?" he yelled. A deputy in mirrored shades raised a fresh order. "Eviction! Effective immediately, Hatruri," he said. Marcus stared at the movers, muscling his grandmother's couch toward the lawn. "Stop! Careful with that," he barked. A sheriff's deputy lifted a new order, the ink still fresh. "Judge Crowley signed this morning. Bank submitted additional evidence." Marcus scanned the page, stomach dropping. The new transfer bore a glossy notary stamp and a signature that mimicked his mother's hand, close but not right. "Not your house anymore, buddy," a mover muttered, letting the couch thud onto cracked concrete. Curtains twitched, pity mixed with smugness across the block. By dusk, the yard looked like a yard sale after a storm. Boxes split, picture frames spidered, linens grit-stained. One neighbor across the street folded his arms and smirked, like gravity was finally doing its work. Marcus sat on the steps, jacket collar up against a stubborn wind that didn't exist, watching the doorway gape like a wound. When Naya called, he couldn't describe the emptiness. "Come stay with me," she pleaded. He stared at the porch light, dead since yesterday. "I'm not done here," he said. Morning brought resolve sharper than sleep. He marched to the courthouse and filed an emergency motion challenging the revised evidence, attaching side-by-side signatures and pointing to the date, 24 hours after his mother's stroke. Tasha, the clerk with the tired smile, stamped it. "You're back quick." "They didn't even wait the 7 days," he said. "They never do," she murmured. Outside, a patrol car rolled slow. "Mr. Rhee," the officer drawled from the window, mirrored lenses reflecting nothing. "We've had reports of loitering." "At a courthouse?" Marcus said, jaw tight. He spent the afternoon hunched over a table at the community center, nursing vending machine coffee, hands inked with statute numbers. Mrs. Hollins shuffled in, her cane-tapping rhythm. "You look like you're arguing with God," she said, easing down. "Feels like I'm arguing with paper pretending to be law," Marcus sighed. She peered at his notes. "Paper is power when you know how to read it." He nodded, grateful for the reminder. That discovery order wasn't mercy, it was leverage. He needed to sharpen how he swung it. 3 days later, the bank fired the next shot, a motion to dismiss discovery as oppressive. Marcus drafted a tight reply, citing cases he'd dog-eared at 3 a.m., and filed it before lunch. Crowley's chambers called in-person hearing. Theater. He ironed his shirt on a towel laid over the motel desk, reprinted exhibits, and walked in steady. Landon delivered his silk-smooth spiel about fishing expeditions. Marcus rose, voice even, and pointed to inconsistencies the bank still hadn't explained. Crowley frowned, then relented. "Discovery stands. 7 days. Produce." Marcus didn't make it home before another blow landed. His bank app showed account restricted, fraud review. Autopays bounced. The motel manager knocked, expression apologetic but firm. I can't float another night. He crammed clothes into a duffel and carried his mother's photo wrapped in a t-shirt. When he reached the community center to ask about extra shifts, Tom Brooks, the director, waited by the door. I'm sorry, Marcus. Donors are spooked. We have to let you go. It felt orchestrated. Not a battle, siege warfare. That night, he rented the cheapest room he could find, neon buzzing outside like a trapped insect. He cataloged next steps, document the forged transfer, push sanctions for discovery abuse, move for a stay pending investigation. His phone buzzed. Unknown number. Mr. Ree, came Landon's cultivated calm. Let's be practical. You walk away, we unfreeze your accounts, clear your credit, add a relocation stipend. Fresh start. No house, Marcus said. No problem, Landon replied. Refuse, and we'll bury you in motions until you can't breathe. The line clicked dead. He didn't sleep. Before sunrise, he was back at the library, pulling anti-predatory lending statutes and assembling a request for a full audit of the loan's chain of title. As he left the clerk's window, Naya called, whispering, 2 guys were outside my building, hoodies, watching the door. I called the cops. They shrugged. Marcus, this is getting bigger than you. He pressed a palm against cool marble. If they win, they'll do it to anyone. That's the point. A pause. Then you'd better fight smarter, she said. By late afternoon, a lead surfaced in his notes. The notary listed on the supposed second mortgage, one Denisha Fowler, licensed 2 towns over. If she hadn't witnessed the signature, the entire document fell apart. He borrowed a friend's car, an old Corolla that rattled at 30, and drove out past strip malls and dust-chalked lots to a sun-faded bungalow with a "Beware of Dog" sign bleaching on the gate. He knocked twice. The door opened a cautious inch. Tired eyes peered out. Miss Fowler, I need a minute. She saw her stamp on the photocopy and went a shade paler. I can't talk about that, she whispered, starting to close the door. Marcus wedged his foot gently. Please. They're stealing homes with signatures like this, not just mine. She held his gaze, ethics warring with fear. Finally, she let him in. The living room smelled like burnt coffee and lemon cleaner. I didn't witness that signing, she said at last, voice trembling. A bank runner brought documents, said the client was ill. I stamped. I regret it. Marcus swallowed hard. If you'll sign an affidavit, we can reopen everything. It's fraud and perjury if they used your stamp without presence. She wiped at her eyes. They'll come for me. My job. My apartment. I can't promise safety, he said, but I can promise the truth matters. Silence stretched. Then she nodded, small but resolute. They drafted a short affidavit on his laptop, printed it at a copy shop, and she signed before an independent notary who raised an eyebrow at the irony. Paper finally fighting paper. He filed an emergency motion to reopen based on newly discovered fraud, attaching Fowler's affidavit. Crowley set a hearing for the following week, irritation sharpening each syllable. Progress, thin but real. When Marcus returned to the motel, the lock was sprung, the room ransacked. Drawers yanked, mattress flipped, laptop gone. The folder, with copies of Linda Ortiz's internal bank memos, his earlier ally, was missing too. Panic ricocheted through his chest. He called Denisha. 2 men came by my job, she whispered, asking questions. They knew I talked to you. The hearing week approached like a storm front. Marcus slept little, photocopied everything twice, and stored backups with a friend. He practiced direct, cross, and closing in whispers, timing breaths between sentences. The morning before court, a burner text pinged, "You should have taken the deal." He pocketed the threat and walked in anyway. Landon was already seated, expression cooled to granite. Judge Crowley scanned the file with visible annoyance. Mr. Ree, you claim fraud? Marcus lifted the affidavit and met his eyes. Objection, Landon snapped. Foundation, hearsay, and it's irrelevant to possession. Marcus stayed calm. We're not arguing possession, we're arguing standing. If the second mortgage is forged, everything downstream collapses. Crowley peered over his glasses. Counsel? Landon hedged. We need time to verify. Marcus stepped in. They verified enough to evict me. A long beat. The judge exhaled. Temporary stay of foreclosure, pending investigation. The gavel popped like a starter pistol. Outside, Marcus didn't smile. He wrote a checklist. The victory lasted 48 hours. When Marcus returned to the clerk to schedule discovery pickup, Tasha frowned at her screen. Your case is flagged for procedural review, she said. Removed from the active docket until reconsideration. He blinked. But the stay, she winced. An emergency motion to reconsider landed this morning. Until the judge rules, everything's paused. It was a stalling tactic designed to starve him out. His phone buzzed. Denisha. They froze my paycheck. Landlord's threatening me. He typed back. I'm filing. Another unknown number. Marcus answered. Landon's voice purred, minus the courtesy. You keep escalating, people you care about get uncomfortable. Marcus pictured Naya's watchers, Denisha's accounts, Linda's missing job. Witness tampering is a felony, he said. Can you spell contempt? Landon chuckled. Can you spell homeless? Marcus hung up before anger made him reckless. He took the bus to legal aid anyway, hunting a co-counsel name he couldn't afford. The intake worker slid a list. Maybe one of these clinics can help. He spent the night at a 24-hour diner under buzzing lights, files spread like battle maps across Formica. A cook refilled his coffee without asking. He drafted a motion for sanctions over spoliation and intimidation, then tightened his audit demand for the chain of title, precise dates, custodians, custodial logs. A plan required paper and patience. When he finally looked up, dawn nudged the blinds. He texted Naya, "Stay somewhere else tonight." She replied, "Already with my cousin." He felt the smallest relief. By mid-morning, he filed everything: sanctions motion, amended discovery, and a request for judicial notice of foreclosure race memos Linda flagged before getting burned. He didn't attach her copies, those were stolen, but he referenced dates and internal titles bold enough to twitch nerves. Outside, a reporter asked, "Are you Marcus Ree?" Comment, he answered, "I intend to prove forgery." Daylight mattered more than headlines. Back at the library, he set 2 backup sinks and labeled folders like a quartermaster. At the community center, Mrs. Hollins found him boxing his last locker items. "They cut you loose?" she asked. He nodded. "Then we fight with what we have," she said, slipping him an envelope, 20s saved from bake sales. He shook his head. She pressed his hand closed. "You'll pay it forward." He accepted, throat tight. On the way out, he posted scanned pleadings online, time-stamped and mirrored. If they erased him, the record would still speak. He walked into heat with a lighter step. 2 days later, Crowley convened the intimidation hearing. The gallery buzzed. Landon denied everything with wounded polish. Marcus called Denisha. She testified, voice shaking, about the courier and stamp. Landon tried to rattle her. She didn't break. Marcus handed up her affidavit, a copy of the notary register, showing no in-person signature that day, and hospital records proving his mother's admission. Crowley's jaw flexed. "Counsel, this concerns me." For a heartbeat, Landon's mask slipped. Marcus stepped into cameras and questions. He kept it clipped. "We want documents and the truth." A tenant union rep pressed a card into his palm. "You're not alone." He tucked it into his wallet like armor. That night, he crashed on a friend's couch, alarm set so he could check that cloud backup still synced. At 3 a.m., an email pinged from an anonymous Proton account. "Check docket, minute order." He logged in and stared. The stay was reinstated, narrow but real. Mourning brought consequences. The motel refused to release forwarded mail. "Corporate policy," the clerk said, eyes down. At the bank, the teller smiled without teeth. "Your review continues." He walked out and nearly collided with Damon Klein. The manager's smirk was back. Tough week, Ree? Marcus looked past him. Where are the original wet ink documents, Damon? Or do we only do PDFs when it's convenient? Klein bristled. Talk to legal. We are, Marcus said, in open court. Back at the library, he diagrammed the chain of title, pinning every assignment to a calendar. Gaps glared like missing teeth. He drafted targeted subpoenas for custodians named in servicing logs and a narrow 30B6 notice, topics on endorsements, collateral custody, and notary practices. No fishing, just sharks. A law student nearby leaned over. You in law school? Life school, Marcus said. She grinned, slid over an outline on evidence foundations. Take this, it helps. He thanked her and kept working. The bank answered by producing a thumb drive of scans, watermarked and useless. No original color, no pressure marks, no ink differentials. He moved to compel inspection of the collateral file in a neutral records facility with a forensic examiner present. Landon protested cost. Marcus cited cases. If originals exist, inspection is mandatory. If not, absence speaks. Crowley scheduled a limited inspection. Marcus exhaled. Finally, a room where the paper would have to be real, or confess it wasn't. Naya met him outside the courthouse, eyes tired but fierce. Eat, she said, shoving a foil-wrapped sandwich into his hands, and sleep tonight. My cousin's couch is open. He nodded, swallowing both food and pride. They're coming harder, he said. It means you're landing punches, she replied. Don't forget your guard. He kissed her forehead, grateful she was still in his corner, despite the collateral fire. Before they parted, she handed him a small charm from her grandmother. Pocket this. Inspection day. A records facility conference room humming with fluorescent fatigue, a neutral examiner, unpacked magnifiers, and oblique lights. The bank's rep arrived with a locked case and a practiced frown. Marcus watched every chain of custody step like a hawk. They opened the file. The original second mortgage looked too clean. The notary seal lacked impressed depth. Under angled light, the signature line showed toner speckle, copy artifacts, not ballpoint strokes. The examiner cleared his throat. He moved to strike the document and asked for sanctions. Landon demanded time to consult internal archives. Crewley, present by video, narrowed his eyes. You brought the original collateral file, yes? The rep hedged. The judge's voice cooled. If originals can't be produced, Mr. Ree's motion has teeth. Marcus didn't celebrate. He requested preservation orders on every custodian who'd touched the loan, plus a bar on eviction efforts pending authenticity findings. The court granted both. Simple fairness. Marcus filed a supplemental brief connecting the dots. Forged document, rushed eviction, targeted neighborhoods. He kept the language clinical. Let the facts outrage the court. A housing nonprofit offered an amicus letter on systemic foreclosure abuse patterns. He accepted. That night, he slept 6 straight hours for the first time in months. In the morning, 3 voicemails waited. One supportive stranger, one garbled threat, and one from a small TV station asking for an interview. He said yes. The segment aired that evening. Marcus kept it measured. Documentation integrity isn't a technicality, it's ownership. Comments exploded, some cheering, some spitting. He shut the app and focused on motions. An hour later, his phone buzzed. Linda Ortiz. They met in a quiet park. I can't show my old memos, she said, scanning for tails, but I can tell you department nicknames and where bodies are metaphorically buried. She outlined priority pipeline flags, zip codes marked for quick eviction. Back at the law library, he used Linda's breadcrumbs to refine discovery, communications with pipeline codes, eviction acceleration criteria, and lists of flagged census tracts. Landon responded with the usual, overbroad, burdensome, irrelevant. Marcus drafted a meet and confer letter that read like a scalpel, narrowed time frames, defined terms, search strings that left no wriggle room. He lodged it with the court to memorialize good faith. Paper built a record, records built outcomes. He kept tightening. 2 days later, a red tag appeared on Naya's building. Fire code reinspection. The timing stank. She texted photos of inspectors wandering hallways, snapping exit lights. Coincidence? She asked, and maybe, he typed, hating the word. He arranged for her to stay elsewhere for a week. Then he filed a protective order motion covering witnesses and close associates, cataloging suspicious events. Landon called it paranoia in reply. Marcus attached affidavits. Let the court decide whose story smelled worse. Crowley granted limited protective relief and warned both sides. Marcus seized the window, noting the judge's tone had shifted from indulgent to wary. The bank dumped emails, heavily redacted, but metadata leaked dates and subjects aligning with Linda's map. Priority processing, litigation exposure. He requested in-camera review of unredacted copies, citing the crime fraud exception. Landon objected predictably. The judge took it under advisement. Marcus exhaled, then indexed exhibits until 2 a.m. He kept pushing. He visited his mother's emptied house, now padlocked and quiet. He stood at the curb where the couch once sat and promised aloud, "I'm bringing this back." A neighbor who'd smirked before lingered across the street. This time the man offered a nod that wasn't mockery. Progress softens edges. Marcus left a note on the door for process servers. Updated mailing address, council of record references. Make papers find him, not accidents. Survival wasn't just courage, it was logistics. The in-camera order landed. Crowley would review unredacted emails. Landon's filings turned strained, the polish scuffed. Meanwhile, Marcus secured a pro bono consult from a retired litigator who'd watched the TV segment. Over decaf, the man mapped trial strategy. Juries hate forgery, he said, but survive to trial. Keep asks modest and surgical. Marcus nodded, revising motions to request only what moved the needle. Precision wasn't surrender, it was aim. He filed a trimmed compel. That afternoon his phone buzzed again. Unknown. Walk away, the voice said, processed and low, or someone gets hurt. He recorded the call and sent it to a friend who knew audio. Then he walked to the precinct and filed a report, attaching timestamps and docket numbers. The desk sergeant shrugged, but took the statement. Even indifference creates a trail. On the way out, he texted Naya, "Vary routes, share location." She replied with a thumbs up and a heart. He breathed easier, slightly. Crowley's chambers issued a minute order. Preliminary review suggested non-privileged portions were improperly redacted. He ordered a supplemental production. Landon asked for reconsideration, denied. The new tranche included a memo referencing minimizing litigation exposure by expediting possession prior to challenge. Marcus read it 3 times. There it was, cold policy in clinical phrasing. He filed a notice of supplemental authority, attached the memo, and kept his prose plain. It spoke volumes. Next came the bank's "we found a different original" stunt, a late-night filing in attaching grainy photographs of a supposedly wet ink note stored off-site. Marcus moved to strike and demanded physical inspection with the examiner again. Crowley set a hearing. In court, Landon insisted the note had always existed. The examiner, under oath, explained pressure indentations, ink aging, and chain of custody basics like a teacher correcting a charming liar. Crowley ordered the note produced physically, not pictured. 72 hours later, no note. Instead, the bank filed a declaration about a warehouse flood, damaging archives. Marcus stared at the PDF, then at the calendar. Last week was bone dry. He attached weather records to a sanctions motion deadpan. Crowley's patience thinned to a wire. He set an evidentiary hearing on spoliation and adverse inference. Marcus prepped exhibits until dawn, labeling every tab so a stranger could navigate blind. He wasn't just telling a story, he was building a map. The hearing crackled. Marcus walked the court through timelines, requests, inspections, and non-appearances. Landon objected again, then tried charm. It slid off. Crowley ruled adverse inference regarding the missing original, monetary sanctions, and a reinforced stay, barring any eviction attempts until authenticity and standing were resolved. The gavel fell. Outside, Marcus sagged against a pillar for 5 seconds, then straightened. This wasn't an ending, it was air. He texted Naya. Then he breathed. Momentum drew attention. A coalition of churches and tenant groups asked him to speak after Sunday service. He kept it tight. Know your paperwork. Ask for originals. Don't sign what you don't understand. He didn't mention strategy or witnesses. He mentioned hope and the parts of law that keep doors from slamming without reason. Afterward, a young father asked, "How do I start?" Marcus handed him a list: county recorder, servicing history, copies of notes. Empowerment is contagious when shared. That night, his cloud backups pinged, attempted access from an unfamiliar device. He rotated passwords, enabled hardware keys, and printed one more set of pleadings to stash off-site. Redundancy kept him calm. Sleep came in slices. At 2 a.m., a thud downstairs jolted him, just a neighbor dropping something, but his heart sprinted anyway. He messaged Naya. "All good?" She answered, "Safe. Doors double locked." He stared at the ceiling and repeated the retired lawyer's mantra, "Survive to tell it." Morning brought an order compelling limited unredactions under the crime fraud exception. Buried inside was an email chain where a manager wrote, "Push the pipeline before defense takes root." Defense, not defenses. An admission disguised as slang. Marcus highlighted it for the court and wrote 3 calm paragraphs, tying it to his mother's house, a calendar, and a couch on a curb. He didn't rant. He diagrammed causation. Crowley set a case management conference, noting serious concerns, leverage. Back at the records facility, the examiner completed his report. Indicators of reproduction on the second mortgage. Inconsistencies in custody logs. Missing shipping manifests. Marcus filed it under seal, then lodged a redacted summary for the public docket. He requested a bench trial on standing issues, or alternatively, a jury trial if credibility disputes loomed. He wasn't afraid of a jury anymore. He feared delay. Crowley agreed to bifurcate, standing first. That stripped away distractions. No more detours. Landon pivoted. He filed a motion to strike Marcus's pleadings as vexatious. Marcus answered with a timeline table. Dates, requests, orders, violations, calm columns marching across pages. He added a declaration from the examiner and short quotes from the judge's rulings. No heat, just daylight. The motion died at argument. As they left, Landon leaned in, voice low. "You'll never get the house back." Marcus didn't slow. "Maybe, but the record will be right." He meant it. The bank tried one last charm offensive, a global settlement that restored his accounts, erased late fees, and offered a mid-5-figure check if he signed an airtight confidentiality clause and waived all claims. He printed the proposal, laid it beside his mother's photo, felt the tug of relief. Then he imagined Denisha evicted, Linda blackballed, neighbors tagged pipeline. He wrote back, "Offer rejected, produce originals, fix the record." Naya squeezed his hand. "I'll back whatever tells the truth." Case management conference day. Crowley arrived with notes. "We try standing in 4 weeks," he said, setting firm pre-trial deadlines. Discovery would be limited to authenticity endorsements and chain of title. Marcus requested 2 depositions, the custodial records manager and Damon Klein. Landon fought Klein. Crowley allowed a 2-hour cap. Marcus prepped outlines like choreography: open, control, close. He practiced in front of a borrowed camcorder, critiquing his own tics. The retired litigator's notes helped. Stay focused. Klein's deposition ran like a leak. He couldn't name who authorized the second mortgage courier. He couldn't explain why the branch logbook listed an after-hours visit the same day the note supposedly signed. He bristled when Marcus asked about "people like you" comments. Landon objected to tone. Marcus rephrased, surgical. "Did you say the system isn't built for you?" Klein hesitated, then said, "I don't recall." The transcript captured the pause. Sometimes the absence lands harder than denial. The records manager proved worse for the bank. Under oath, she admitted gaps in custody during a transfer window. Emails showed panic, when Marcus requested inspection. "We were told to find something that looked original," one message read. She insisted that meant retrieve, not fabricate. Marcus let the jury that would be draw its own arrow. Afterward, Landon looked like a man whose calendar had shrunk. Marcus walked to the bus stop and allowed himself a small smile that reached his eyes. Night brought a text from an unknown number, a photo of his mother's house with a red X scribbled over it. He forwarded it to the detective handling his harassment report, then printed it with the metadata footer. Fear and Fury did their usual tug of war. He chose paperwork. He added the image to his protective order file and emailed Naya. "Heads up, extra careful." She replied, "Already on it." He sat with his mother's photo and promised again, "I'll fix the record." Pretrial filings flew. Marcus submitted proposed findings on standing. No valid endorsement, forged second mortgage, spoliation adverse inference, and tainted eviction orders. He cited statutes and the examiner, not adjectives. The bank flooded the docket with declarations that said much and meant little. Crowley issued trial procedures, time limits, exhibit numbering, objections on the clock. Marcus spent 12 hours labeling binders and 2 more rehearsing where each tab lived. Preparation is protection. Discipline wins. On the eve of trial, the tenant union held a candlelight vigil outside the courthouse. Marcus spoke briefly, voice catching once. "This case is about my mother's signature. It's also about yours." He thanked Denisha, without naming her, and alluded to helpers who kept receipts when powerful people hoped no one would. Reporters recorded. Landon watched from across the street. Unreadable, Marcus went home early, turned off his phone, and tried to sleep. He dreamed of ballpoint grooves catching light. Trial morning. Marcus set exhibits on counsel table and breathed, like his mentor taught him. Crowley entered, efficient. Landon called the bank's custodian first. The story bent under its own weight. Marcus cross-examined in clean lines. Who had the file on this date? Where is the shipping log? Why does the notary register lack an entry? Objections fizzled. The examiner testified last, methodical. Oblique light, toner scatter, pressure analysis. Crowley asked pointed questions. The record, at last, spoke. Closing arguments loomed when Crowley halted proceedings for scheduling. "We'll reconvene next week," he said, eyes on Landon. "In the interim, no eviction attempts, no account holds, no contact with witnesses outside counsel presence." The warning had teeth. In the hallway, Landon approached Marcus, voice low. "Last chance. Take the money." Marcus met his gaze. "Produce the originals, or concede standing." Landon's smile cracked. "You think you've won." "No," Marcus said. "I think the truth is winning." Outside, cameras waited. Marcus kept it simple. "We're asking for authenticity and standing, nothing more." A reporter shouted, "Can a man without a law degree expose corruption in open court?" He thought of Denisha's shaking voice, Linda's risk, Mrs. Holland's envelope, Naya's steady hand, and his mother's laugh on mortgage burning day. "Anyone can tell the truth," he said. "You just have to back it with receipts." The courthouse steps buzzed. For the first time, he didn't feel outnumbered, just ready. Clark was waiting by the door, arms folded. "Mr. Rhee, your card declined again. You're 2 nights behind. Pay by morning or you're out." Marcus didn't argue. What could he say? His account was frozen, his savings gone. He grabbed his meager belongings and slept in the back seat of a borrowed sedan, tucked in a dim corner of the community center lot. The irony stabbed, fighting for a home while sleeping in a car. Dawn found him hungry, trudging to the library anyway. He bought the cheapest coffee with his last crumpled dollar, settled into a corner table, and opened the legal notes he'd built page by page, night after night. His phone buzzed. Linda Ortiz. "Call me. Found something." He dialed immediately. She answered on the first ring. Voice hushed. "I slipped into the bank system one last time before they killed my access. There's an email thread, Landon and Klein, bragging about accelerating your eviction with revised filings. They banked on the judge not looking closely." Marcus's breath snagged. Do you have copies? Screenshots, Linda said, shaky but resolute. If I share them, I'm done in this state, blacklisted everywhere. He understood the cost. This isn't just me anymore, he said quietly. A long pause, then a heavy sigh. I'll send them, but be careful. They play for keeps. Minutes later, images arrived, emails between Blake Landon, Damon Klein, and Crowley's assistant, detailing a procedural bypass that greased the foreclosure. It was blatant, proof that could explode everything. Before he could file, the counterpunch landed. At a FedEx counter, printing copies of Linda's screenshots, his phone rang. Naya. Two guys showed up at work, she whispered, voice trembling. Asked my boss whether I'm tied up in criminal stuff. He said if I bring heat again, I'm gone. Marcus closed his eyes, swallowing the rush of helpless fury. It wasn't just him anymore. They were peeling at anyone close. Linda, Denisha, Naya, burning the edges, hoping he'd abandon the center just to protect them. When he reached the weekly motel, the key didn't turn. The manager, a stout man with a permanent scowl, stood planted by the door. No pay, no room, he said, arms crossed. Marcus didn't argue. He slung his backpack over one shoulder and kept walking, shoulders dipping under the quiet weight of defeat. Homeless again, broke again. Evidence clutched in his bag, like a lifeline that meant nothing if he couldn't survive long enough to use it. He slept in a 24-hour laundromat, dryers humming lullabies. Sunrise shivered through dirty glass. Marcus headed straight to the courthouse, determined to file regardless. At the counter, the same clerk from before winced sympathetically. Judge Crowley's calendar is full. He's not hearing new motions until next month. Next month? Marcus snapped. They'll sell the house by then. She shrugged, eyelids heavy. I don't make the rules, Mr. Ree. He stumbled outside, heart hammering, doors slamming in sequence, legal, financial, shelter, each echoing the last. For the first time, defeat felt final. That night, he sat in the car beneath a stuttering streetlight, courthouse distant as a lighthouse at low tide. He'd thrown everything he had, time, money, sanity, into a machine that chewed and spit him out. Was this the end? Broken, homeless, conveniently forgotten? He saw his mother's hands, work-worn, proud the day she burned the original mortgage. She never quit. Neither would he. He opened his beat-up laptop, leached diner Wi-Fi, and began drafting an emergency motion no one could ignore. He alleged newly discovered fraud and potential judicial misconduct, attaching Linda's screenshots, Denisha's affidavit, and a timeline of every retaliatory hit. He e-filed it, blasting copies to local outlets and watchdogs. Make it public, make it stick. Then he waited, engine off, watching courthouse windows wink dark one by one. He didn't sleep. He counted breaths. He rehearsed answers. If another blow came, he would meet it face first. When dawn thinned the sky, he was still there, hands steady enough. He woke from a ragged doze in the driver's seat, spine barking. Phone buzzing on the passenger tray, court notification. He blinked hard, opened the email. Subject: emergency motion. Hearing Friday, 10 a.m. Relief hit like warm water. Brief, necessary. Friday was 2 days away. The bank wouldn't idle. Evidence alone wasn't enough anymore. He needed bodies beside him. That afternoon, he walked into the Justice Collective, a small civil rights outfit that took cases the world called impossible, and asked for time. The receptionist, box braids, skeptical eyes, tilted her head. Appointment? No, he admitted, laying Linda's folder and his motion on the desk. I can prove a bank is forging, harassing witnesses, and gaming the court. If no one helps, they'll get away with it. She studied him, thumbed through pages, and sighed. Wait here. 15 minutes later, he sat across from Terrence Boyd, late 40s, gray at the temples, courtroom mileage in his eyes. Boyd read silently, then muttered, Damn. Boyd held up the email chain. They didn't even hide it. Textbook foreclosure fraud. And Crowley's assistant in the loop? If this breaks, it blows open the whole racket. Marcus swallowed. So you'll help? We'll file amicus backing your motion and prep for Friday, Boyd said. But listen, Marcus, this isn't just a foreclosure anymore. You're lighting a fuse attached to powerful people. They will come harder. Marcus nodded. They already took everything. I've got nothing left to lose. All right, Boyd said. Let's make noise. 48 hours blurred. Boyd's team drafted through the night, called reporters, rallied tenant groups and pastors, lined up affidavits. Marcus slept in slices, fueled by bitter coffee and adrenaline. Every phone buzz felt like a new attack. Frozen accounts, trumped-up warrants. But the quiet stretched unnatural. The bank wasn't idle. It was circling. Friday morning arrived gray and cold. He stood on the courthouse steps, clutching the battered folder like a compass. Naya appeared first, determined eyes softening the edge of panic. You ready? She asked. As I'll ever be, he said, squeezing her hand. Denisha Fowler hurried up, glancing over her shoulder. I'll testify, she panted. If they retaliate, reporters are here, Boyd cut in. Public record, harder to bury. Inside the gallery was packed. Activists, reporters, rubberneckers. Near the back, Linda lifted a chin-high nod. At counsel table, Landon sat coiled, smugness scraped to metal. Crowley took the bench, irritated at the audience. Emergency hearing, 1628 Pine Street, he announced. Mr. Rhee, proceed. Marcus stood, pulse pounding, but voice steady. Your Honor, this foreclosure rests on forged paperwork. The so-called second mortgage was notarized without the signer present. The notary, Ms. Fowler, is here to say so. Crowley's expression flickered. Annoyance, maybe worry, before turning neutral. Proceed. Under Boyd's questions, Denisha admitted the truth. A courier handed her a document, told her the client was ill, asked her to stamp. She never witnessed a signature. Landon sprang up. Objection! Hearsay, irrelevant. Marcus stepped forward, lifting printed emails like a flag. Irrelevant, he said. These emails between Mr. Landon and Mr. Klein show they knew. They rushed the eviction with revised filings, counting on silence. There's coordination with chamber staff. The room rippled. Crowley hammered his gavel, face darkening. Order. Do you have proof of authenticity? Boyd rose. We served the bank's servers yesterday. Metadata checks out. This court has a duty to investigate. Color drained from Landon's face. He leaned toward the bench, whispering fast. The gallery's murmur grew teeth. Crowley scanned the room, the phones, the pens, the eyes, and seemed to understand the tide. He sighed, hammered once. The court will conduct a full review of the foreclosure process, including document authenticity. The foreclosure is stayed. Mr. Rhee retains possession pending investigation. Marcus's knees almost unlocked. He'd punctured the wall. Outside, flashes popped. Boyd fielded questions. Naya squeezed Marcus's hand. You won, she whispered. For now, he said, they'll come back harder. He was right. Wounded predators don't limp, they lunge. Landon brushed past in the aisle, voice iced. You made enemies you can't afford. Marcus didn't blink. So did you. Reporters swarmed the steps. Boyd spoke for the cameras, while Marcus stood just behind, exhaustion catching up. He let the noise blur into a muffled river. A hollow victory was still a victory. Behind the relief, he felt the next move forming elsewhere, in rooms without windows, on phones with numbers most people never dial. He steeled himself for that call. The next blow came fast. Clark cornered him outside the motel. Card's no good. You're 2 nights behind. Pay by morning or you're out. He had nothing left to sell that wasn't essential. He slept in the car again, seatbelt his blanket, staring at the courthouse silhouette. Before sunrise, he drafted a sanctions addendum for witness intimidation and improper ex parte coordination, stitching Linda's screenshots to a timeline sharp enough to cut. He filed it and copied every newsroom now watching the docket. By mid-morning, the clerk pinged him. Emergency calendar, Monday. The bank answered with a motion to dismiss his claims outright. Baseless, Landon wrote. No standing issues, only clerical scuffs. Boyd's team countered before lunch, attaching Denisha's affidavit, Linda's thread, and a demographic map of priority zip codes. The court set both for the same hearing. That night, two men in dark suits stepped from a black SUV near the sidewalk. "Mr. Ree," one said, flashing a private investigator badge. "Come with us." Marcus kept his feet rooted. "Got a warrant? Subpoena? Anything?" The second man smiled without warmth. "We can involve law enforcement." Marcus lifted his phone. "Touch me, and this goes to my cloud and the Justice Collective. You want that heat?" They traded a look, then coolly withdrew. Message received. "We can reach you anywhere." He called Boyd immediately. "They're trying to rattle you," Boyd said. "It means you're close. Lay low, I'll make calls." Marcus nodded, hands finally shaking after. The weekend dragged like wet cloth. He reviewed every page until words smudged. Sunday night, he met with Denisha and Linda in Boyd's office to rehearse. Linda looked wrecked. "If they lose, it's not about one house," she said. "It exposes their pipeline." Marcus nodded. "Then let it expose." Monday dawned cold and clean. At the courthouse, Naya handed him coffee with both hands. "Whatever happens, you've already done more than anyone expected." He sipped, tasted resolve, and stepped inside. The atmosphere crackled. Reporters filled the back row. Landon sat composed but kept glancing at the gallery. Klein hovered, pale. Crowley entered, gavel sharp. "We're here on plaintiff's dismissal motion and defendant's sanctions." He nodded to Landon. The banker's lawyer stood, spilled honeyed phrases about lawful procedure and minor discrepancies, urging the court to end this nonsense. Crowley pivoted to Boyd. The civil rights attorney stayed cool. "If it's clerical, where are the original endorsed documents? They had standing. Prove it." Boyd gestured toward Denisha. "And the notary never witnessed the signature she stamped. That's not clerical. That's fraud." Crowley turned to Denisha. "Do you stand by your affidavit?" "Yes, Your Honor," she said, voice steadying. "I was misled. I stamped without presence." Landon's mask cracked. "The bank was unaware of any notarial irregularities," he protested. Marcus rose, pointed to a thick folder. "And the missing endorsement? They never owned the loan. We've got a list of families hit by the same playbook." The gallery buzzed. Reporters' fingers flew. Crowley glared at Landon. "Can your client produce original documents with proper endorsements?" "A beat too long, then. We're still reviewing records." Crowley slammed the gavel. "Enough! Plaintiff's dismissal motion denied. Discovery continues." Marcus exhaled, but the judge kept going. "Mr. Ree, if you cannot show malicious intent beyond procedural errors, this won't reach trial. You have 10 days to present irrefutable evidence of intent." The gavel fell. Marcus stood very still. The clock started ticking loud. On the steps, Boyd squeezed his shoulder. "We bought time, but Crowley's hedging. He's giving them one last escape hatch. We need intent. Plain." The bank flooded Boyd's inbox with paper. Delays, denials, counter-accusations. Denisha received a threat on voicemail. Linda found herself quietly blacklisted. Marcus felt the pattern tighten exactly as expected, but he still had one move. Late one night, in Boyd's office, he paused a grainy video frame, an internal conference room 3 months old, Klein and executives' talking shop. The audio was ugly in its casualness. "If we delay processing just enough, by the time they notice the signatures don't match, it won't matter. The court will side with us. Keep pushing." The words chilled. Linda had obtained the clip through a burned-out IT tech who'd quit in disgust. It was exactly what Crowley demanded, intent uncloaked. Marcus barely slept. He printed transcripts, stamped time codes, readied an affidavit. In the morning, they walked into court with a small, devastating drive. "Your final opportunity, Mr. Ree," Crowley said, voice even. Marcus held up the flash drive. "Video evidence from an internal bank meeting. Officials discuss a plan to push through questionable foreclosures before homeowners can challenge paperwork." Landon launched up. Illegally obtained? Inadmissible. Boyd didn't blink. Whistleblower affidavit attests authenticity. Crime fraud exception bars privilege. Crowley rubbed his temple. Play it. The room hushed. The feed flickered. Klein's voice filled the courtroom. Every cynical syllable under fluorescent truth. Pens scratched, jaws tightened. Silence grew heavy. When it ended, no one moved. Crowley stared at Landon with something close to disgust. Explanation? Landon's voice thinned. Context matters. These remarks are crystalline, Boyd said. This wasn't error. It was strategy. Crowley's fingers tapped the bench, an audible metronome. He looked at Marcus, and for the first time, respect edged his gaze. This court finds sufficient evidence of malicious foreclosure practices, he said at last. The foreclosure of Mr. Rhee's home is nullified. Relief surged through Marcus like heat after frostbite. Crowley continued, voice hardening. The court orders an independent investigation into First Harbor's foreclosure program and refers possible ethical breaches by Mr. Landon to the state bar. Landon blanched. Klein looked seasick. The gavel cracked. Reporters swarmed. Boyd clapped Marcus on the back. You didn't just save a house, he grinned. You lit the board. Naya found Marcus and squeezed his hand. He managed to smile. To his surprise, it held. But under it, he knew. Appeals, pressure, blowback were coming. Outside, the winter air felt like a clean rinse. The crowd's hum faded at the edges as Marcus took in the doors, the stone, the steps where he'd once felt small. He'd won, officially, but he didn't trust that ease. Boyd jogged down from the clerk's window. Filed already, he said, waving a stamped order. On the record, the house is yours. The words hit with a delayed thud, real, heavier than imagined. Marcus nodded, throat tight. Then let's make sure it stays mine. Near the base of the steps, Linda lifted a hand. Years of corporate polish stripped away, she looked tired and unbowed. Denisha stood beside her, arms crossed to keep the tremble out of her hands. Their costs were carved into their faces, jobs, licenses, quiet. They'll appeal, Linda said. They'll fight the investigation. Crowley will try to bury his trail. Marcus nodded. I know. He glanced at cameras flashing. Now I know how to fight, and I'm not fighting just for me. That evening he stood on the cracked sidewalk outside the house that nearly vanished. The eviction notice was gone. The deed, freshly stamped, was back where it belonged. He traced his mother's name softly, like a blessing. Inside, the empty rooms were full of echoes, daytime soaps, late homework, stew steaming over payday. Faded wallpaper clung stubbornly, like history. He'd lost so much, sleep, savings, quiet, but something larger returned, purpose. He'd pried open a system that thrived on secrecy by refusing to shut up. A knock. Boyd stood on the stoop, manila envelope in hand. Settlement offer, he said, passing it over. They want to stop the bleeding. 6 figures blinked from the page, enough to patch a life, to exhale. Then a clause, buried like a trap. Total release, airtight confidentiality, no civil claims. A gag order with a comma. Marcus looked up. If I sign, the investigation dies. Boyd's mouth twitched. No one would fault you. You already won. Marcus shook his head. Tell them no. Fallout came quick. The video ricocheted across feeds and nightly broadcasts. State investigators raided regional offices, hauling boxes and towers. Klein resigned under duress. Landon was suspended pending bar review. Another whistleblower surfaced, dropping Crowley's side door donations into daylight. But the win that mattered found him on the porch at dusk. A woman approached with a teenage son in tow. Mr. Rhee, my sister, same bank, same forged paper. They dropped the foreclosure. She's keeping her place. Marcus's smile started in his chest. That's why we fight, he said. The sun slid behind rooftops, leaving the house in honest shade. He knew it wasn't over. Machines don't dismantle themselves. They retool. But eyes were open now. People were asking for originals, tracing endorsements, refusing to yield. Marcus, once a man the system bet would fold, was still standing, and louder. Power, he'd learned, didn't live only in bank vaults or chambers. It lived anywhere someone refused to be quiet when quiet felt safer. Marcus's battle wasn't only a personal rescue, it was an unmasking. Banks don't always play fair. Courts often lean toward institutions. The gears favor those with money, influence, insulation, but resilience, knowledge, and community can jam those gears. The bank counted on confusion and fear, on him drowning in jargon and giving up. He learned to swim. He read statutes like road maps, spotted cracks, and wedged them open. An inevitable loss turned landmark, with a library card, a backbone, and stubborn friends. Another lesson burned bright. Solidarity matters. Marcus didn't drag this boulder alone. Linda risked her career. Denisha told the uncomfortable truth. Boyd and his crew lifted with him. Strangers sent coffee, outlines, amicus briefs. Corrupt systems bloom in isolation. They wilt under light. When people share receipts, coordinate, and refuse to be atomized, change becomes possible. Justice isn't automatic, it's won. Inches at a time, at a price. The machine never stops grinding. The work is to jam it, together, again and again. Weeks later, Marcus walked the block and felt the difference. Neighbors made eye contact. The earlier smirk from across the street turned into a nod of respect. He posted a checklist on the community center board. Ask for original notes, demand custody logs, verify endorsements. He added hotline numbers and clinic hours. He didn't pretend to be a lawyer. He presented a map. People started bringing him envelopes, asking, "Can you look?" He always said the same thing. "Let's read it together." At home, he fixed a leaky faucet badly, then better. Naya laughed from the doorway and handed him the right wrench. "You can fight a bank," she said. "You can tighten a valve." He grinned. "One day." She kissed his cheek. The phone pinged. Boyd. "Investigators want a statement tomorrow." Another ping. A tenant union meeting asking him to speak Sunday. He marked both. Then he stood in the kitchen, quiet, and let himself breathe in a room he still owned. On Sunday, the church basement filled with folding chairs and paper cups. Marcus kept it simple. Know your paperwork. Don't sign what you don't understand. Originals matter. Endorsements matter. Get everything in writing. He didn't sell fear. He taught preparedness. After, a young father asked, "What if I'm already behind?" "Behind isn't gone," Marcus said, handing him a list. "Start here." He went home tired, pockets full of new names, determined to be a bridge, not a gate. One night, a text arrived. A photo of his house with a red X scrawled over it. He printed the metadata, filed a report, and added it to the protective order stack. Fear rose in familiar wolves and receded just as quickly. He wasn't unafraid. He was disciplined. He varied routes, checked locks, carried a whistleblowing community on speed dial. The next morning, he taught a neighbor to read a notary register. Power is a habit. He practiced it until it stuck. Crowley resigned to spend more time with family, a press release said. The state bar opened formal proceedings against Landon. Klein disappeared into vague consulting. The investigation widened, netting other branches, other counties, the same ghost endorsements and rushed filings. Reporters kept calling, but Marcus learned to ration interviews. He wasn't the story. The scheme was. He saved his voice for rooms that changed outcomes, council meetings, legal clinics, living rooms smelling like coffee and fear, where telling the truth mattered most. One evening, Marcus sat with Boyd on the porch, sharing the last of a cheap red. "You know," Boyd said, looking at the street, "you did something rare. Most folks never push far enough to see the gears." Marcus shrugged. "I was too tired to stop." Boyd chuckled. "That's the trick. Fatigue feels like the end. Sometimes it's the beginning." They clinked mismatched mugs. A siren wailed far off. The porch light buzzed. The house held. They let the quiet last a while. A letter arrived. A class action forming. anchored by the investigators' findings. They wanted Marcus as a named plaintiff, maybe an advocate. He read it twice, then called Linda and Denisha. "We don't move alone," he said. "Not anymore." At the first organizing meeting, a half-dozen families brought files in cracked binders. He pointed to stamps, dates, gaps. He didn't promise miracles, he drew lines. When someone cried, he passed tissues. When someone raged, he nodded. Compassion is a tool too. He carved a small desk from a thrifted table and put it in the front room by the window. Above it, he taped his mother's mortgage-burning photo and a sticky note. "Ask for originals." He made copies of the checklists. He kept pens that wrote smoothly. He learned to say, "I don't know, let's find out," without shame. And he learned to celebrate wins that were only almost wins. A delay granted, a hearing scheduled, a judge who looked twice instead of once. Some nights he replayed the video, Klein's voice so certain. It didn't make him angry anymore. It clarified the task. "Keep pushing," the banker had said, as though the phrase belonged only to them. Marcus adopted it, turned it, made it a promise. Keep pushing to demand documents. Keep pushing to teach neighbors. Keep pushing to write down what works so the next person starts ahead instead of behind. He closed the laptop and wrote 3 pages of notes, practical and plain. He kept a list on the fridge titled "When the Machine Grinds." It read, "Sleep anyway, eat something green, ask for help, back up files, breathe, read the statute, walk the block, call your people, check the locks, praise small wins." He crossed items off with a thick marker. The list felt silly sometimes and life-saving other times. It wasn't inspiration, it was maintenance, the kind of stubborn care that makes comebacks possible and prevents new cracks from widening quietly. Months later, he saw Clark outside the old motel. The manager lifted a hand awkwardly. "Saw you on the news," he said. "Didn't expect—" He trailed off. Marcus nodded once. "Me neither." They stood in a rare, decent silence. Not friends, not enemies, just 2 men who had once met at the edge of a line, now able to step back from it. Marcus walked on, lighter. Forgiveness wasn't the job, but it was a relief when it arrived unasked, small and human. At a community forum, someone asked, "Aren't you afraid they'll come again?" Marcus said, "Of course. Fear isn't the enemy. Secrecy is." He explained that paper trails protect people, that copies and timelines and witnesses stack into something heavy enough to move a judge. He didn't mythologize himself. "I'm a guy who learned to read and refused to stop," he said. "You can too." Afterward, an elderly man pressed a folded 20 into his palm. "For paper and stamps," he said. A young journalist shadowed him for a day, scribbling while Marcus answered calls, read deeds, taught a teenager how to file a public records request. "You're different on camera," she said later. "Quieter?" He smiled. "I like microphones, but I love libraries." She laughed, then got serious. "You know they'll try reinventing the scheme." He nodded. "That's why we build muscles, not just moments." She wrote that down. Later, her piece framed him not as a hero, but as a habit. On a Tuesday, he found a box on the porch. No return address. Inside, a silvered pen and a note for signatures that are real. No threat, no stink, just kindness. He set the pen on his desk, thought about the weight of good tools, then uncapped it and practiced his name slowly. Not a symbol, just a fact. This is who I am. This is where I live. He capped the pen, smiled, and returned to a neighbor's file, margin highlighter ready. When the appeal hearings began, Marcus attended with Boyd, sat straight and said little. The bank's new counsel tried fresh spins, but the record was stubborn. Fraud isn't a rumor when it's documented. The panel affirmed the nullification and the referral orders. Outside cameras blinked. Marcus declined interviews that day. He walked 2 extra blocks with Nea, bought 2 empanadas, and ate them on a curb. "You look taller," she said. "The air's lighter," he answered. "That's all." He taught Saturday workshops, free, crowded, messy. He built a simple slide deck, Chain of Title 101. He used big fonts, fewer words, more arrows. He didn't assume knowledge. He repeated the basics cheerfully. It's not your job to make the system comfortable, he told the room. It's the system's job to make sense. People laughed, then asked sharper questions. After he loaded chairs onto a cart and wiped crumbs from tables. Advocacy looks a lot like housekeeping, he thought. One afternoon, a state investigator called. We're filing charges against 2 mid-level managers, she said. More to come. Marcus thanked her, then stared at the wall, feeling something like closure, and knowing better than to name it. Justice is a verb with a long tail. He texted Linda and Denisha. They answered with prayer hands and heart emojis. He screenshot the thread and saved it. The small archive, the quiet ledger. These were anchors too, the ballast that kept him steady. He replaced the hallway wallpaper with Naya, cursing and laughing as glue fought back. They picked a stubborn pattern anyway, bold lines, unapologetic. Crooked, she observed, stepping back. Resilient, he corrected. They left one corner, imperfect on purpose. Later, he looked at it and felt something unclench. Perfection is brittle. The house deserved something that could flex and spring back, like the people in it. He ordered pizza, fell asleep on the floor, and woke with paste on his elbow. On the anniversary of his mother's mortgage burning day, he invited a handful of neighbors and shared stew at the kitchen table. He told the short version, we tried harder. He didn't linger on victories or villains. He poured coffee, cleared plates, and sent folks home with leftovers. After he stood alone by the sink and let himself miss her without drowning in it. Grief and gratitude sat side by side, elbows touching, the way family does when space is tight. A letter from the bar arrived. Landon disbarred. Marcus read it twice, then set it under a magnet shaped like a red apple. He didn't cheer. He went for a walk, hands in pockets, and watched a kid practice ollies on a cracked sidewalk. The board slammed, skittered, returned. The kid kept trying. Marcus thought of statutes and signatures, of drafts that didn't land until they did. He raised a hand when the kid glanced up. Nice, he called. Again. Sometimes he still dreamed of the black SUV and the low, processed voice on the phone. He'd wake tense, then listen. Naya's breathing, the fridge hum, the old house settling like a cat. He'd pad to the front window and look out at the porch light. It stayed on. He made tea, sat at the small desk, and wrote 3 thank you notes to people who'd carried him when he was more weight than person. Gratitude, he'd learned, is protective gear. He got invited to speak at a law school. He said yes and began with a confession. I'm not a lawyer, I'm a reader. He told them what helped. Precise asks, clear timelines, public records, backup plans. He told them what hurt, arrogance, delay, shame. He asked them to remember that paper stands in for people, and if you forget that, you'll defend the machine. Afterwards, a student said, I want to do your kind of law. He smiled. Me too. The class action settled favorably for early families. Marcus took no fee. He insisted on funding for clinics and an online archive of forms and scripts, free, plain language, downloadable. We build exits, he told Boyd. We lower thresholds. The site went live, ugly and fast, then better as volunteers added guides and videos. Some nights he watched the traffic map and thought of porch lights, people across the city, clicking, downloading, naming the thing that cornered them, and stepping around it. A year after the first eviction attempt, he replaced the dead porch bulb with a brighter one and painted the steps a stubborn blue. He fixed the squeaky hinge on the screen door. He planted herbs in cracked terracotta pots. He didn't call it healing. He called it upkeep. Surviving is maintenance, not magic. When the mail came, he sorted bills from flyers and, occasionally, letters with clumsy handwriting from folks who'd kept their homes. He kept those in a shoebox under the bed. He started a Tuesday night drop-in at the library. Paperwork hour. People showed up with envelopes and anxiety. He brought sticky notes, highlighters, and a calm voice. They left with to-do lists and a plan. He learned to say, take a photo of that now, and write down who you spoke to and when. He watched shoulders settle. He learned the sacred art of the follow-up call the next day. Accountability is a gift you give a stranger and yourself together. On a small stage at a neighborhood festival, someone handed him a mic. "Tell them your story," she urged. He told the shortest version yet. "A bank lied. We told the truth. We kept receipts." Laughter, then applause. He added, "If you're scared, you're not alone. If you're tired, join us. We take turns." After, a teenager asked for a selfie and whispered, "My mom's fighting them now." He wrote his number on the back of a flyer. "Call." He kept the car that had been his shelter during the worst nights. He could have traded up, but he didn't. On hard days, he'd sit in the driver's seat and remember the diner Wi-Fi and the court email that saved Friday. He'd nod to the dashboard like an old friend and then go back inside. The car wasn't a relic of pain. It was proof of passage. He vacuumed the crumbs, replaced a wiper blade, and kept gas in the tank. A neighbor once said, "You're lucky the camera crews showed." Marcus corrected him gently. Luck didn't file motions. He believed in luck, but he trusted labor. He trusted librarians, clerks who stamped fairly, examiners who told the truth, volunteers who made coffee, friends who stood guard at hearings. He trusted the court when it behaved like a court, and resisted it when it didn't. He trusted that small, steady acts compound. He trusted that stubbornness, properly aimed, is merciful. Sometimes, when his head was too full of filings and forms, he walked past the bank branch and stared through the glass. New posters, same perfumes. A teller who once smiled without teeth now smiled for real. She mouthed, "Thank you." He dipped his chin and kept moving. He didn't mistake appreciation for absolution or victory for safety. He took both as signals. Keep course, keep pace. He crossed at the light, waited his turn, and reached the other curb intact. Linda found work with a nonprofit in another city, less money, more meaning. Denisha kept her license after training and supervision conditions. She started teaching notary ethics at the library on Wednesdays. They visited Marcus once, brought pie, and sat on the porch telling stories that finally made them laugh. Resilience looks like paperwork sometimes. Other times it looks like three people swapping recipes and refusing to let the worst thing be the only thing anyone remembers about them. Boyd took on bigger structural cases with the collective, using Marcus's matter as a template, how to build records that stand up to weather and wind. He sent young attorneys to paperwork hour to learn tone and pace. "Don't confuse volume with force," he told them. "Make it plain and make it precise." Marcus watched them listen and felt oddly hopeful. He wasn't the future. He was the bridge they'd cross. Bridges don't move. They let others move safely. Every so often, Marcus reread the first denial letter, the one that made his stomach drop in an echoing hallway. He didn't do it to reopen wounds. He did it to appreciate scar tissue. The letter was still ugly. He was not. He'd become someone who wrote back calmly with exhibits and then walked to the clerk's window without flinching. He tucked the letter away and laced his shoes. There were still calls to return and files to flag before dinner. On a quiet night, he stood in the hallway and looked at the crooked wallpaper corner. He thought about leaving it permanently imperfect, a reminder of better goals than perfection, persistence, clarity, care. He decided to keep it. He turned off the hall light, left the porch light burning, and headed to bed. Outside, a bus grumbled and passed. Inside, the old house breathed its settling sighs. Marcus listened like you listen to someone you love, attentive, grateful, ready to respond. If you ask him what changed the most, he'll say, "Well, not me, my habits." He learned to ask for help before drowning. He learned that tight deadlines don't excuse sloppy filings. He learned to tape his name and number on folders so scared people could find him again. He learned to label everything and forget nothing. He learned that justice is slow, but people are fast. So you teach, you template, you share, you make the next fight shorter than yours. And if you ask whether it was worth it, he won't give you poetry. He'll point to a couch that didn't end up on a curb, to a deed stamped right, to a porch light that still burns. He'll point to a kid practicing ollies and a neighbor pressing a 20 into his palm for stamps. He'll point to a shoebox of letters from people who kept their homes. He'll say, "Worth is a ledger, ours is finally in the black." Marcus Ree's story began as a desperate defense and became a blueprint. Banks still scheme, courts still wobble, but readers become fighters, and fighters become teachers. The lesson isn't that one man toppled a system. It's that he proved receipts, and resolve can bend it inch by inch. So if you're scared, you aren't alone. If you're angry, turn it into lists. Keep your records, share your strategies, light your porch, and when they push, keep pushing back together with everything you've got. Lesson: paperwork is power. If you've lived 6 or 7 decades, you know storms don't just come from the sky, they come in envelopes. Marcus learned what many of us learned the hard way. The person who keeps the receipts keeps the house. He fought a bank with library cards, letter-sized copies, and a porch light that never quit. Not grand speeches, timelines, signatures, chain of title, every date written in ink. For older Americans who remember carbon paper and file boxes, this is familiar courage. Read everything, ask for originals, and insist on proper endorsements. Paper isn't just paper. In America, it's proof and protection. Friends, what would you have done in Marcus's shoes? Have you ever faced a landlord, a lender, or a clerk who hoped you wouldn't ask for originals or read the fine print? Tell us one habit that has protected you: keeping a folder by the phone, writing down names and dates, or making copies before you mail anything. Your tip could save a neighbor's roof. If this story helped, please like, comment, and subscribe to my YouTube channel so more folks, especially seniors, can learn practical ways to stand their ground. Share this video with a friend who might need it today.
This is a fictionalized performance. No real people, cases, or events are depicted. This video is not news, not a documentary, and not based on real events. It is a creative storytelling approach aided by artificial intelligence.